We've all been told to set goals from the time we're kids. We're asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's a question wrapped in good intentions, but it teaches us early on that life is about reaching outcomes. Pick a target, hit the target, then pick another one, hit that one too. That's what success looks like, right? But here's the problem. So many of us hit our goals and feel absolutely nothing. We get the job, we make the money, we check the box, and yet something is missing. A strange kind of emptiness settles in. You tell yourself, I should feel happier than this, but you don't. That feeling isn't an accident, it's a signal. A signal that maybe, just maybe, the goal wasn't what you're really after. That's why we have to flip the way we approach goal setting. Because goals by themselves don't work. Not for the long term. Not in a way that truly fulfills us. Not unless they are rooted in something deeper. The truth is, before you set a goal, you have to start with purpose. Purpose is not a task. It's not an ambition. It's not even an outcome. It's a cause, a belief, a reason for being. Purpose is the reason you get out of bed in the morning. And when you start there, when your goals are simply an extension of your purpose, you tap into a kind of motivation that doesn't burn out. Let's be clear, having goals isn't the issue. The issue is when the goal becomes the only thing. When the number on the scale, the digit in the bank account, or the title on the business card becomes the definition of success. It's a dangerous game. Because what happens when you hit it? Or worse, what happens when you don't? Your identity gets attached to the outcome, and that's when things fall apart. But purpose. That's different. Purpose asks a better question. What is the reason behind this goal? Purpose is the compass, the thing that keeps you steady when plans change, when timelines stretch, when motivation dips. Purpose doesn't care if the world claps for you. It just wants you to show up. Let me tell you a quick story. A friend of mine, let's call him David, had a dream to become a surgeon. For years, that was the goal. Every decision he made was laser focused on one thing, getting into medical school. He sacrificed relationships, sleep, joy. It all became about the goal. And eventually he got in, he achieved it. And for the first few months he was thrilled, but then something happened. He started to notice that he wasn't happy. He wasn't curious anymore. He felt tired, drained, not physically, but emotionally. And one night, after another 16-hour shift, he sat in his car and asked himself a question no one had ever encouraged him to ask. Why did I want this in the first place? And the answer shocked him. Because the truth was, he didn't want to be a surgeon. He wanted to help people heal. He wanted to be of service. Medicine was supposed to be the path, not the point. But somewhere along the way, the goal took over, and he lost sight of the purpose. That's what happens when we focus on the goal first. We end up building ladders against the wrong wall. We become so busy climbing that we forget why we started climbing in the first place. Starting with purpose doesn't mean you won't have goals. It just means your goals are in service to something bigger. Think about it. A goal is a result, but purpose is a reason. And when you understand the reason, you're far more resilient in the pursuit of the... Let's take an example from outside the professional world. Say someone wants to run a marathon. That's the goal. But if they only focus on the race, on crossing the finish line, they'll likely start training with discipline, maybe even obsession. But what happens if they get injured halfway through? What happens if the race is canceled, or if they just lose interest? Now imagine a different approach. They ask themselves first, why do I want to run this marathon? And the answer is something like, because I want to prove to myself that I can commit to something difficult. Because I want to build mental toughness. Because I want to raise money for a cause I believe in. Now, the training isn't just about the race. It's about becoming someone stronger, someone more focused, someone more generous. Suddenly, even if the race disappears, the growth still happens. The goal may shift, but the purpose continues. That's what makes a goal actually work. It's not whether you cross the line. It's whether the process of getting there is aligned with who you are and what you believe. And here's the amazing thing. When your goals are built on purpose, people feel it. They can see it in your eyes. They hear it in your voice. Purpose is contagious. It inspires. It connects. It draws people in. And in a world that's increasingly skeptical of superficial ambition, what we need more than ever are people who are led by cause, not applause. So before you write your next goal down, pause, take a breath, and ask yourself this: what is this really for? If the answer is something you'd still fight for even if no one was watching, then you're on the right track. That's the kind of goal that works, not because it's clever or trendy, but because it's true. We don't need more goals. We need more reasons. And when we start there, the goals we set will stop being boxes to check and start becoming steps toward a life that actually means something. We live in a world obsessed with appearance. Everywhere you turn, someone is showcasing their highlight reel, what they've accomplished, what they've bought, where they've been. Social media has made it easier than ever to display success, but harder than ever to define what success really means. And in that environment, many of us fall into a trap. We start setting goals not because they matter to us, but because we hope they'll make us matter to someone else. But that's the wrong starting point. The moment you set a goal to impress others, you've already compromised its value. Because no matter what you achieve, it will never be enough. Not for them, and certainly not for you. You'll reach one milestone, and the applause will fade. So you'll chase another, and another, until one day you look around and realize you've built a life that looks good from the outside, but feels hollow on the inside. That's not success, that's performance. And it's exhausting. We have to shift the way we approach goals. The question isn't, will this make me look successful? The question is, who does this goal serve? If the answer is only your ego, start again. Because ego may get you moving, but it will never keep you going. What lasts, what sustains you through the setbacks and the silence is service. Service to a cause, to a mission, to something bigger than self. When you set goals that serve, you create meaning. You align your actions with your values. You build something that outlives applause. And ironically, when you stop chasing attention and start focusing on contribution, the recognition comes anyway, but this time it's grounded in respect, not performance. Let me give you an example. A young entrepreneur I once met was determined to start a business. He had the vision board, the metrics, the marketing plan. But when I asked him why he wanted to start this company, he said, because I want to be a millionaire before I'm 30. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Financial success can be a worthy goal, but there was no depth behind it, no clarity, no cause. So I asked him again, what's the purpose? What problem are you solving? Who are you helping? And he hesitated because he hadn't thought about that. Compare that to someone else I spoke with, a woman who left a corporate job to start a nonprofit that teaches financial literacy to underserved communities. She said, I grew up watching my parents struggle with money because no one ever taught them how to manage it. I wanted to break that cycle. That was her fuel. And every goal she set, every workshop, every dollar raised, every community reached was anchored in that purpose. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was trying to make a difference. And that difference made her unstoppable. Not because it was easy. In fact, it was brutally hard. There were setbacks, doubts, burnout. But she kept going. Why? Because the goal wasn't about her. It was about the people she was serving. When your goal is to serve, obstacles don't feel like personal attacks. They feel like part of the process. You don't take failure as a sign that you're not good enough. You see it as feedback, data that helps you improve so you can serve better. That shift in mindset is everything. You see, goals that impress are often built on comparison. What are other people doing? How do I measure up? Will this make me look important? And comparison is a moving target. No matter what you do, someone will always be ahead of you. Someone will always have more. And that means your sense of worth will always be at risk. But goals that serve, they're built on contribution. What problem can I solve? What gift can I offer? What need can I meet? And when you come from that place, you don't need external validation. The work itself becomes the reward. The impact becomes the fuel. Think about the people you admire most, not the ones that are famous, but the ones who've truly moved you. The teacher who believed in you, the coach who pushed you, the mentor who saw something in you before you saw it in yourself. None of them did it to impress you. They did it to help you, to serve you. And that's why they made a lasting impact. Now ask yourself, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? Do you want to be remembered for the car you drove, the house you bought, the followers you had? Or do you want to be remembered for how you made people feel, for the lives you touched, for the problems you helped solve? Setting goals that serve doesn't mean you can't aim high. It means you aim high for the right reasons. It's not about shrinking your ambition. It's about expanding your intention. You can still build the company, write the book, run the marathon, but do it because it helps, not because it impresses. Do it because it means something, not just because it looks good. And here's the irony. When you set goals that serve, you do stand out. You become magnetic. People are drawn to authenticity. They want to follow someone who's chasing something real. In a world full of noise, service cuts through. It creates trust. It builds connection. It's what leadership is made of. So before you write down that next goal, pause. Ask yourself, who is this really for? And be honest. If the answer is applause, likes, praise, or status, then keep digging, because those things won't last. But if the answer is, this goal helps someone, this solves a real problem, or this gives back in a way that matters, then you've got something worth pursuing. Let your goals be a reflection of your values, not a projection of your insecurities. Let them point to something beyond yourself. Let them serve, because when you serve, you don't just succeed. You build a life that matters. And isn't that the whole point? We're a culture obsessed with getting it right. We crave flawless execution, perfect timing, the clean result. We idolize the overnight success, the genius with the perfect plan, the story that goes from zero to hero in a straight, uninterrupted line. But that's not how real life works. That's not how progress happens. And that's why so many people set goals and then give up on them. Because perfection is a trap, is a myth dressed up as ambition. It tells us that if we can't do it perfectly, we shouldn't do it at all. That if we mess up once, we've failed. That if we don't look the part, we're not worthy of the result. And the worst part, we believe it. We internalize it. And we carry that quiet, suffocating pressure into everything we try to do. So we start strong. We make the big plans. We buy the journals, download the apps, commit to the new routine. But the moment we miss a day or lose focus or fall short of the perfect outcome, we give up. We say, I'm just not disciplined enough. Or, I guess this wasn't meant for me. But the truth isn't that we're weak. It's that we were chasing the wrong thing. If we want to set goals that actually work, we have to stop aiming for perfection. We have to aim for progress. Progress is real. Progress is honest. Progress makes space for mistakes. Progress allows us to be human, and that's why it works. Because it honors how growth actually happens. Think about anything meaningful you've ever achieved. Maybe it was a relationship, maybe it was a skill, maybe it was getting through a hard season in your life. Whatever it was, I'm willing to bet it didn't come together in one perfect, polished step. It came from trying, stumbling, learning, adapting. It came from moments of self-doubt, of small victories, of doing the hard thing again and again, even when no one was watching. That's progress. And that's what builds confidence. Not the illusion of getting everything right, but the reality of getting back up every time you fall. There's this idea in psychology called the progress principle. It says that the single biggest motivator in work and in life is simply making progress. Moving forward, even in small ways. Not winning, not dominating, just moving. Because movement creates momentum, and momentum creates belief. Perfection, on the other hand, creates paralysis. You get stuck trying to plan the perfect approach, the perfect outcome, the perfect path, and while you're waiting for things to be just right, someone else is out there making a small move, learning, adjusting, getting better, not because they're more talented, but because they're willing to be imperfect in service of something greater. The people who go the furthest aren't the ones who never mess up. They're the ones who keep showing up even after they do. I remember talking to a musician once, someone incredibly successful by any measure, and I asked him what his process looked like. He laughed and said, "My process? It's a mess. I write terrible songs, dozens of them. I just keep writing until something feels true. He didn't wait for inspiration to strike perfectly. He trusted the process of progress. He gave himself permission to create badly so that eventually something good could emerge. That's the shift we all need to make. Progress over perfection. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy of your goal. You don't need to get it all right on the first try. You don't need a flawless record. What you need is a system, a set of habits, a rhythm, something that keeps you grounded on the days when motivation is low and doubt is high. This is why systems matter more than willpower. Willpower is like adrenaline. It gives you a quick boost, but it fades fast. Systems, on the other hand, are sustainable. They create structure, which leads to progress. And when you build for progress, you create something that doesn't rely on you being perfect. It just relies on you showing up. Let's say your goal is to write a book. The perfectionist mindset says, I need to write the best chapter, the perfect sentence, the flawless opening. And with that pressure, you stare at a blank page for days. But the progress mindset says, I'm going to write 500 messy words today. Not because they're great, but because they get you moving. And movement is what matters. Or maybe your goal is to get healthier. The perfectionist says, I need to follow the meal plan exactly, hit the gym 5 times a week, and cut out everything bad. But the moment you miss a day or eat something off plan, you feel like a failure. Progress says, I'm going to drink more water today. I'm going to move for 15 minutes. That small action might not feel huge in the moment, but repeated over time, it compounds. That's how real change happens. Through consistent progress, not fleeting perfection. And here's the thing. People are drawn to progress, not polish, not perfection. When you share your journey honestly, when you let people see the struggle, the process, the truth, they connect. Because it reminds them they're not alone. It gives them permission to be human too. Perfection isolates out. Progress connects. You don't inspire others by being flawless. You inspire them by being real. By showing them what persistence looks like, what trying again looks like, what growing into something looks like. That's what leadership is. That's what authenticity is. It's not about having all the answers. It's about being committed to the journey. So the next time you set a goal, don't ask yourself, how can I do this perfectly? Ask yourself, what small step can I take today that moves me forward, and then take it. No matter how awkward, how slow, how incomplete it feels. Because if you keep taking those small steps, they'll add up. They always do. Progress is what turns a good intention into a lived reality. It's what transforms effort into excellence. And it's what separates the people who dream from the people who build. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to keep moving. When we talk about goals, we often start with the what. What do I want to achieve? What's the target? What are the steps? It's how we're taught to think. Focus on the outcome, break it into tasks, track the progress. And that's not wrong. Goals need structure, they need clarity. But if you stop at the what, you'll never build anything that lasts. You'll burn out. You'll lose focus. You'll reach a milestone and feel nothing. Because real motivation doesn't come from what you want. It comes from why it matters. There's a reason most New Year's resolutions die out by February. It's not because people are lazy or weak. It's because they're chasing goals without anchoring them in purpose. And purpose isn't just some lofty abstract idea. It's deeply personal. It's your reason. It's the emotional root beneath the outcome. It's what gives your goals weight. Without that, you're just chasing motion. A goal without a why is like a ship without a compass. You can sail fast and far, but you might end up nowhere near where you intended to go. Worse, you might get there and realize it's not where you even wanted to be. The most powerful goals are the ones that serve something beyond self. They're tied to a bigger why, a reason that transcends your ego, something that reaches people, moves people, helps people. That doesn't mean you can't have personal dreams. You should. But the ones that endure, the ones that truly fuel your spirit, are the ones that connect to impact. I once met a man who wanted to run a marathon. At first glance, it seemed like a standard fitness goal. He talked about training plans, diet, gear, all the usual. But when we talked more, he opened up. He wasn't just doing it to get in shape. He was doing it because 5 years earlier, his brother had passed away from heart disease. They used to run together as kids. And he'd promised himself that if he ever had the chance, he'd honor his brother's memory by doing something hard, something they never got to do together. That was his why. And it changed everything. Because on the days when training felt impossible, when his body hurt, when the weather was bad, when motivation faded, he didn't need discipline. He had devotion. He remembered why he started. He remembered who he was doing it for. And that got him through the finish line. When you attach your goal to a bigger why, you move from pressure to purpose. You stop asking, how do I stay motivated? And start asking, what does this allow me to give? And when you do that, you become stronger than resistance. You become focused, resilient, steady. It's not about being obsessed with performance. It's about being obsessed with meaning. When leaders build organizations without a why, what do we get? Burnout, high turnover, disengagement. But when teams know why they're doing what they're doing, when they feel connected to something beyond tasks, they work harder, care more, and stay longer, not because they're told to, because they believe in it. The same is true for personal goals. If you want to lose weight, ask why. If it's just to look good for summer, that motivation will fade. But if it's so you can have the energy to play with your kids or prevent a health scare that runs in your family, that becomes sacred. That becomes personal. If your goal is to start a business, don't just focus on the money. Ask what change you're trying to make. Who are you trying to serve? What pain are you trying to relieve? That emotional connection will fuel you when logic fails. And if you don't know your why yet, that's okay. You're not behind. In fact, the process of discovering your why is one of the most important things you'll ever do. It requires curiosity, honesty, vulnerability. You have to look inward, not just forward. You have to pay attention to the moments that moved you, the times you felt most alive, the things that made you cry. Because often your why is hiding in your story. I remember speaking to a young woman who wanted to become a teacher. Everyone told her she should aim higher, that she was too smart, too ambitious to just teach. But when I asked her what drew her to education, she shared that when she was a child, a teacher stayed after school with her every day for months to help her learn how to read. That teacher changed her life. And now, she wanted to be that person for someone else. Her why wasn't prestige, it wasn't money, it was impact. And because of that, she didn't need anyone's permission to pursue it. She had her compass. When your why is clear, you don't need constant motivation, you don't need perfect conditions, you don't need applause. You move forward because you believe in the destination, you believe in the reason for the journey. And here's the beautiful thing, your why doesn't need to impress anyone. It just needs to be real. Some people's why is their family, some their community, others a calling they can't quite explain. What matters is that it's meaningful to you, because the more personal your why, the more universal your impact. That's not a contradiction, it's a truth. People resonate most with those who are deeply connected to their own purpose. So when you sit down to set your goals, don't just ask what, ask why. Write it down, say it out loud, share it with someone you trust. Let it live outside your head, because when your why is clear, your what becomes powerful. And when the journey gets hard, and it won't be grit that keeps you going. It'll be purpose. Purpose is what lifts you when the weight gets heavy. It's what steadies you when the path feels uncertain. It's what pulls you forward when the world tells you to stop. Attach your goals to something bigger than you, something you'd fight for, something you'd suffer for, something you'd get back up for again and again. That's the kind of goal that works, not just because it's smart, but because it's rooted in something true. And in the end, that's the kind of life you want to build. Not just a life that looks good, but a life that means something. We tend to think success comes from big moments, a breakthrough, a bold move, a flash of brilliance. But in truth, real success comes from the small things we do repeatedly, especially when no one is watching. Goals aren't achieved in grand, dramatic gestures. They're achieved quietly in the rhythms, rituals, and routines we build. In other words, if you want to achieve something big, don't focus on the goal. Focus on the habits that will make the goal inevitable. This might sound counterintuitive. We're taught to be goal-finketed. We love targets, milestones, checklists. They give us a sense of control. But a goal is just a destination. It tells you where you want to go. A habit is the vehicle that gets you there. And unless you build the right vehicle, you won't arrive, no matter how clear the destination. Think about the last time you set a goal for yourself, maybe to get in shape, write a book, build a business. Chances are you started strong. You felt energized, excited, focused. But then life happened. You got busy. You got distracted. And slowly, that big, meaningful goal began to fade into the background. Not because you didn't care, not because you weren't capable, but because the systems weren't there to support you. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. But habits are consistent. They take over when motivation fades. They become part of your identity, part of how you move through the world. That's why the most effective goals aren't just intentions. They're built on behaviors. Habits aren't glamorous. They're not exciting, but they are powerful. And over time, they become the difference between people who wish for change and people who live it. I once spoke with a CEO who had completely transformed her company's culture. She'd gone from leading a stressed, scattered, underperforming team to building one of the most collaborative, purpose-driven organizations I've ever seen. When I asked her what the turning point was, she didn't say a major hire or a brilliant strategy. She said, we started holding daily 15-minute check-ins. A tiny habit, a new rhythm, a consistent moment of connection. And that single, seemingly small behavior rewired how her team communicated, collaborated, and cared. That's the power of habits. They shape who we become. There's something liberating about this because it means you don't have to do everything at once. You don't have to transform your life overnight. You just have to build the right behaviors and repeat every day, every week, quietly, patiently. That's how you win. This is the reason most people don't stick to new habits. It's not that we're lazy. It's that we make the process too hard. We try to do too much too fast. We build plans that depend on us being highly motivated, highly focused, and in perfect conditions. That's not sustainable. Real change doesn't happen when we act like heroes. It happens when we act like humans. And humans need simplicity. If you want to create a habit that sticks, start small, really small. If your goal is to run 5 miles a day, start by putting your shoes on at the same time every morning. That's it. Put them on. You're building the behavior before the outcome. You're wiring the identity before the intensity. Because once something becomes part of who you are, the actions follow. This is why identity matters more than achievement. If you see yourself as someone who runs, you'll run, even when it's hard. If you see yourself as a writer, you'll write, even if it's messy. If you see yourself as a disciplined person, you'll keep showing up, even on the days you don't feel like it. Habits reinforce identity. Identity reinforces habits. It's a cycle. And it works in both directions. This is why it's so important to pay attention to the story you tell yourself. Are you saying, I'm terrible with money, or I'm someone learning to be more financially mindful? That shift matters, because how you see yourself shapes what you do, and what you do shapes what you believe. I once met a man who had lost over 100 pounds, not through surgery or some radical program, but through simple, consistent habits. Every day he logged what he ate. Every day he walked for 30 minutes. Every day he checked in with a friend for accountability. Not because he was perfectly disciplined, but because he designed his life to make the right choice the easier choice. He didn't try to force willpower. He built systems. He made progress inevitable. And that's what this is really about. Not trying harder, but designing smarter. If you want to read more, put a book on your pillow. If you want to eat better, remove the junk from your house. If you want to write daily, create a writing space that invites you in. You're not trying to fight against yourself. You're building an environment that supports your future self. So many of us think that success comes down to intensity, but it actually comes down to consistency. Anyone can go hard for a week, but it's the people who build habits, quiet, repeatable, sustainable habits, who go the distance. It's the musician who practices every day even when they don't feel inspired. It's the leader who holds space for their team every week, even when there's a crisis. It's the parent who reads to their child every night, even when they're exhausted. That's what builds trust. That's what builds momentum. That's what builds legacies. When you set your next goal, don't just ask, what do I want? Ask, what kind of person achieves that? And what does that person do every single day? Then start doing it. Not perfectly, not impressively, just consistently. Because in the end, success isn't about intensity, it's about identity. And identity is built in the small, repeated actions that no one sees until one day everyone does. So forget the highlight reel. Focus on the habit. Build it patiently, live it fully. And over time, you won't just reach your goal, you'll become the kind of person who makes goals inevitable.